Good morning and a very warm welcome to the Connecting Nature Innovation Summit. We're absolutely delighted that you can join us virtually here in Glasgow on this spring morning. I'm Julie Proctor, Chief Executive of Green Space Scotland, and we're delighted to be a partner in the Connecting Nature programme and to be co-hosting this summit along with colleagues at Glasgow City Council, one of the front-runner cities of the Connecting Nature programme. Whilst we are sad that we aren't all gathering here today in person, delivering this Innovation Summit digitally has had some real benefits, not least that so many more of you have been able to join us. Over the next 3 days, we'll be welcoming over 1,000 delegates from over 50 countries. So this truly is a global gathering and a real feeling that Glasgow is welcoming the world as it will again later this year with COP26. This has been an unprecedented year. And as we start now to look forward with hope for a brighter future, over the next 3 days, we will showcase, discuss and explore innovations in nature-based solutions. We'll look at how they can, how they should, indeed how they absolutely must be part of the green recovery. Today marks a year since those of us in the UK went into our first lockdown. It is a time for remembrance and for reflection, and we will be marking the 1 minute silence for reflection at 12 noon today. Over the year, we've all had to adapt, to learn to do things differently, and to do that at a speed and a pace that has been absolutely unprecedented. So as we look forward to the future with hope, we want to apply that same speed, that same urgency to the realisation and embedding of nature-based solutions. And I'm sure you're going to be inspired by the discussions and presentations over the next 3 days. We normally do the thanks at the end of an event, but I just wanted to bring them up front this time and to acknowledge the incredible work of the Summit team in creating and curating this first Connecting Nature Innovation Summit. And I'd particularly like to give thanks to my colleague Emma Halliday at Green Space Scotland, to Sean Kelly and Laura Mowat at Glasgow City Council, and not forgetting Gillian Dick, who leads the Council's work on the Connecting Nature programme. Many thanks also to all of the speakers, the session chairs, the other contributors and Connecting Nature partners. And a huge thank you to all of you for joining us at the summit. It is going to be an interesting and inspiring 3 days. We've got a really varied and exciting programme, an absolute smorgasbord of delights and innovations. We're looking forward to presentations, to panel discussions, to virtual site visits and innovation cafes. So please do engage and enjoy. Listen, learn and share. And please do check out the expo area to find out more about summit partners and speakers and to connect and network with colleagues. So let's get the summit underway. I'd now like to invite Councillor Susan Aitkin, leader of Glasgow City Council, to say a few words of welcome. Over to you, Susan.
Good morning and thank you very much, Julie, and all colleagues at Green Space Scotland and everyone in the Innovation Summit team. I'm delighted that the selection of Glasgow as one of the 3 frontrunner cities in the Connecting Nature programme has allowed us a further opportunity to collaborate with our international peers in seeking a more sustainable and fairer future for our planet. Glasgow's status as host for COP26 has even thus far been an incredible opportunity for the city to plug into truly global conversations on the challenges and the responses to the climate emergency. Within the city, local government and subnational networks that Glasgow is engaged with, that willingness to share knowledge, skills and experience to achieve our net zero targets is really evident. And the Connecting Nature programme and the Innovation Summit have that same collaborative approach at their core. And I'm proud that the strides that we're taking as a city are being recognised. In so many ways, Glasgow is a template for cities on a similar historic path, that of industrial decline, the physical and social challenges that are the legacy of our pasts, but also the ability to re-emerge into a low carbon and sustainable present and future. And over the next few days, you'll hear about some of the work that's being done here in Glasgow, in Scotland, and indeed across Europe on strategies, approaches and partnerships to deliver a wide and diverse range of nature-based interventions. And Julie's already mentioned them, but I'd particularly like to thank my colleague Gillian Dick and her team for the work that they lead in Glasgow on nature-based solutions, their input into the Connecting Nature project and the work of the Glasgow Connecting Nature team in helping to deliver this very important summit. I want to make a couple of points. Central to the global conversations that Glasgow and our peer cities are engaged in is that critical importance of cities to the sustainability agenda. Cities are where most of the world's citizens live, work and travel. We are literally the heat maps, but cities like Glasgow, Genk and Poznan are where both the greatest challenges but also the greatest gains for carbon neutrality lie. So much about the climate emergency is an urban agenda, and it's cities that are best placed to deliver. And nature-based solutions are absolutely critical to that, to create healthier, more livable places. The bang for the carbon zero buck that investment in cities delivers is equally applicable to nature-based solutions. In terms of the ecological, environmental and social gains and to the well-being of our citizens, natural interventions are inextricably bound up with our transition to net zero. To give just one example, Glasgow's Avenues programme is a long-term project to redesign and reprioritise our key city centre streets to reduce the dominance of the car and create cleaner, healthier spaces. Within that programme, the planting of street trees is of central importance, transforming streets into spaces for people, for recreation, for active travel, and delivering a host of other social, environmental and economic benefits. I also believe it's vital that the net zero agenda is delivered and communicated in a way that resonates with ordinary citizens and is relevant to their everyday lives and challenges. So when I talk about the inseparability of climate and social justice, our citizens have to know that this is also about warmer homes, a positive impact on their cost of living, or delivering the skills and job opportunities necessary for the new green economy. And when I talk about nature-based solutions, I want our citizens to know that this is about making Glasgow a healthier, more attractive and generally better place for them to live in. Again, another example, far too many, particularly of our most socially challenged communities, have been blighted for generations now by swathes of vacant and derelict land, a legacy of our post-industrial past. And there's an urgency now about repurposing these as spaces for recreation, for growing, for carbon sequestration, rain and flood capture, and for health and community engagement opportunities. And the reminder that within this agenda, we must give equal weighting to the grey and blue zones as well as the green is particularly pertinent in Glasgow. Our river, the Clyde, was the catalyst for and location of much of our industrialisation. But save for some regeneration in the past couple of decades, our riverside, just yards from which lie some of Scotland's most deprived communities, has too often festered and been abandoned. As communities were redeveloped, we literally turned their backs to the river. But the interventions necessary to mitigate the threats of global warming have the capacity to release land and transform our riverside. Glasgow's blue zone is the biggest open space in our city with enormous potential, and not solely for economic purposes, for leisure, recreation, restoring and nurturing habitat. This is a nature-based intervention to deliver what our citizens have long asked of us, the return of the River Clyde as the centrepiece of our city life. So thanks very much for coming to Glasgow, for asking me to welcome you here this morning. I hope that in the months ahead we can work together to move from the global pandemic towards COP26 and a global agreement to work for a safer, healthier, more equitable, zero carbon future for planet and for people. I hope that you enjoy the next few days. I'm sure that there will be a lot of great learning and experiences to share. So thanks very much for listening. Goodbye.
Thank you very much, Susan, and thank you to Glasgow for hosting the summit and providing a lead on nature-based solutions. We're now going to move from Scotland's largest city to a Scotland-wide perspective, with an opening address now from Aitkin Campbell, MSP and Cabinet Secretary for Communities and Local Government. Aitkin, over to you.
I'm pleased to have the chance to speak to you today and give thanks to Green Space Scotland and Glasgow City Council for bringing us together, all kindly supported by partners in the European Union. And while we can only be together virtually, having Glasgow, which of course means Dear Green Place in Gaelic, is a suitably named backdrop for today's discussions. This virtual gathering is a reminder, as if one were needed, of just how challenging life still remains as we continue to respond to the global pandemic. It's now a year since those of us here in Scotland went into lockdown. A year since the world changed forever and our lives became heavily restricted. A milestone like this gives us a chance to reflect on that and, importantly, a chance to consider how we choose to move forward. And this is important because while the impact of COVID has been and continues to be harsh and traumatic, we have also seen some actions and activities that we don't want to lose. We saw partnership and collaboration happen at a pace and scale that many of us across public life have been trying to coax and encourage for some time. We saw a flourishing of activity in our communities. We saw a drop in commuting levels, and we saw a reconnection with nature as people got out and explored the green space around them. We all had to rapidly change how we did things, and even though the unfortunate prompt was a nasty virus and a global pandemic, that shift in policy and behaviours, that trust that we place in our communities, and that decoupling from the shackles of red tape are actually not things that we want to lose. So this experience and the opportunity that we have to disrupt what we might describe as an I-beam culture is too precious to miss. Because if we grab it and harness it, the outcomes and the outlook for our people, our communities and country start to look more positive. It's never been enough to simply recover from this pandemic, but to instead reform what we do and reimagine what we want to become. Because while there has been a flourishing of activity and good practice and community endeavour, and while everyone has been impacted by COVID, we all of us know that it has been those with least that have been impacted the most. COVID brought into sharp relief the persistent inequalities that exist in Scotland and across the UK. Everyone was urged to stay at home, with a safe and secure home suddenly becoming a public health tool. It was a whole lot easier if you had a home, and if that home was safe, warm and secure, was connected to the internet, if you had a secure job, or if you had a garden or green space in which you could get out in, enjoy and importantly, feel safe in. So recovery from this pandemic won't ever be enough if all that ends up happening is reverting back to normal, when that normality has failed too many for too long, and where there seems to have been a tacit acceptance that inequality is somehow inevitable. There is a chance now to start to do things differently, to embrace the positive change that we've seen and to build forward with activity to rebalance our economy and refocus on what matters with people and good quality green places at its heart. We should seek to ensure our recovery is green. Focus has rightly been placed on the impact of COVID, but the climate emergency has never left us. Therefore, we should use this moment to build from the much more heightened awareness and appreciation of the environment around us and the well-being that green space and nature brings. And as we move to recovery, the restorative power of nature should not be ignored as part of the healing that we all need to do. That is why, through our programme for government, we've committed to supporting 20-minute neighbourhoods. where people can meet their needs within a 20-minute walk from home, including access to green space, enabling people to live better, healthier lives and supporting our net zero ambitions. And in Housing to 2040, our 20-year housing strategy, we have a focus on the delivery of new affordable homes. But we also recognise the need to also create great places and spaces for people to live, grow and play in. The last year's experience has taught us just how important and crucial it is to get that right. Scottish Government respects the role of nature-based solutions and the multifunctional benefits they can offer. National infrastructure is already integrated in many of our infrastructure programmes such as housing and regeneration, flood, water and drainage management and active travel. We've made some significant injections of funding to support it. Our infrastructure investment plan sets out a long-term vision of infrastructure in Scotland which supports an inclusive net zero carbon economy and includes details on over £26 billion of major projects and large programmes. With overwhelming support through our earlier consultation, we now have the widest definition of infrastructure in the UK and many parts of the world that includes natural infrastructure. This means we can take a more holistic view of our infrastructure assets and recognise the wider contribution that nature can have in creating sustainable places, reducing emissions and improving well-being. These complement our investments of almost £9 billion for environmental sustainability and the transition to net zero emissions. This includes £2 billion dedicated to tackling climate change through our low carbon fund, which provides support for woodland creation, peatland restoration and the reuse of vacant and derelict land. All of these are critical to delivering the infrastructure needed for our transition to net zero by 2045. Our statement of intent for biodiversity sets the direction for a new biodiversity strategy which will respond to the increasing urgency for action to tackle the twin challenges of climate change and biodiversity loss. It highlights the benefit of nature-based solutions such as woodland restoration and creation, peatland restoration and urban green infrastructure for people and nature. And that's why we've committed £250 million over 10 years on peatland restoration and an additional £150 million over the next 5 years in forestry. We're also committed to realising the potential of tiny forests in Scotland which can support biodiversity and improve urban green space for local communities. We've also welcomed the Vacant and Derelict Lands Task Force recommendations and will work with the Scottish Land Commission and other stakeholders to develop proposals to help deliver a culture change in Scotland's approach to vacant and derelict land. As part of that, I am pleased to announce from this week our new £50 million low carbon vacant and derelict land investment programme is open to applications for funding. This programme will help with tackling persistent vacant and derelict land, delivering regeneration and supporting a green recovery, in turn promoting social justice and well-being across Scotland, especially in more disadvantaged areas. And given the flourishing of our communities as they rolled up their sleeves during the last year to look after each other, it's right that we continue to empower them to support their efforts to tackle climate change. That's why we've committed to developing a network of climate action towns that will exploit the co-benefits of climate action, empowering communities to develop greener, healthier, more livable places, whilst contributing to Scotland's response to the global climate and ecological emergencies. We're also working on the next National Planning Framework, NPF4. It's Scotland's spatial plan and will include a review of our planning policy. And some of the most significant policy changes we expect to explore in developing NPF4 will be expanding green infrastructure and natural places, new policies to promote an infrastructure first approach, including green and blue infrastructure, and support for 20-minute neighbourhoods. The pandemic and the desire for a green recovery has prompted us to rethink our neighbourhoods, our towns, our cities and rural communities, to rethink how we live and to reassess what is important to us. And it's clear that nature-based solutions can offer us a different way of doing things that are sustainable and good for the soul and good for our well-being. To deliver this green, fair and human rights-based recovery, government cannot do it on our own, and that's why it is essential that we work in partnership with empowered communities in order that local approaches and contexts are reflected, and because, quite simply, our communities are the experts in what their needs and their aspirations are. Aristotle said, "In all things of nature there is something of the marvellous," and he's right. We have a chance to rebuild a marvellous future, and empowered communities and nature need to be at its heart. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Aileen, for those inspiring words and for sharing with us some of Scottish Government's ambitions and actions for the future around nature-based solutions. We'll certainly carry forward those words of positive change and greener recovery over the next 3 days. And the last speaker now in this opening session, providing a European context to the summit, is Kieran Cuff, MEP. Kieran, over to you.
Thank you, and good morning to you from Brussels, from the European Quarter in Brussels. And thank you to Connecting Nature, the Connecting Nature Project, Green, and Glasgow City Council for inviting me to speak at this opening event for the Innovation Summit. And thanks to Emma for organising, Sean for moderating, and it is really good to join Julie, Susan and Aileen in opening the conference. You know, the last time I was in Glasgow, it must have been about 25 years ago, and I was in Fergusley Park out in Paisley because of a European project that was linking in areas of deprivation in different cities, and it linked in a place called the Liberties in Dublin, where I was then a city councillor, and the community in Fergusley Park, and I met some fantastic people in the few days I spent in Glasgow. And I just had a quick look there, and I was really pleased to see that there was developments in Glencoates Park in Fergusley Park, because green space and the availability of nature is so important back in the Liberties in Dublin, but also particularly in areas of disadvantage in Glasgow and elsewhere. So nice to make that connection. You know, the geographer David Harvey said there's nothing unnatural about New York City. And I think the same can be said about Brussels or Dublin or Glasgow. And we need to understand that there is nothing unnatural about our cities. They are made from and fundamentally based in nature. And humanity's relationship to nature needs to understand this. Because our anthropogenic perspective is causing irreversible damage. And to have a sustainable future, we need to find nature-based solutions to our societal challenges. And these solutions, they hold the potential to provide sustainable benefits for not only nature, but also for people. And from a European perspective, I'm gradually seeing an improved understanding of this within the institutions that I interact with here in Brussels. And I know that more than €200 million has been invested in nature-based solutions research and projects just over the last 4 years. And to give you a few examples from around Europe, I mean, apart from your own Connecting Nature project, there's the Grow Green project, which has led to discernible results in assisting with wastewater runoff in Manchester and temperature regulation in Valencia in Spain. And Urban Green Up has developed a digital tool to fit cities' needs. And then there's the Naturevation project, which scales this up, creating a multi-criteria evaluation framework. And in addition, the Nature for Cities and the Think Nature projects have created platforms to promote nature-based solution methods and dialogue. And looking to the future, we hear a lot of talk about the European Green Deal, but this does provide an opportune framework to fast-track nature-based solutions through strategies such as Farm to Fork and biodiversity, and pledges such as the Bonn Challenge, which sets 2030 targets for forest protection and restoration. Just within the last few weeks, I've been part of a negotiating team on the Connecting Europe facility, 32 billion, a lot of money going into new infrastructure. And we've worked hard to ensure that 10% goes into biodiversity and 60% into climate funding. And nature is at the heart of the inspiration for these decisions. So while the EU must stop deforestation within its borders and ban products linked to the destruction of forests and ecosystems, this must not offset climate inaction in other sectors and in cities especially. And I think climate action has been delayed for decades. You know, the business as usual scenario, which is very hard to shift, but it leaves no time for delaying cuts in emissions. It really doesn't, as we run down the clock to the COP26 summit. We do know that 80% of European cities will live in cities in the year 2050. That'll be a big increase, maybe 36 million or 10% more than today's numbers. And nature has to be at the heart of solutions in our towns and cities, in agriculture, in transport, industry, housing, and energy. And research is essential to future nature-based solutions, but we also need to facilitate wider implementation and collaboration to give local authorities the best tools and knowledge. And because it's at this scale, the local, that true, appropriate and lasting changes can occur and where consistent policies can be constructed. We also need to move out of the silos. I know from having been involved in local government for 30 years that often different groups within local authorities don't speak the same language and often communicate by semaphore at a distance. And far too often, regardless of what the question is, concrete is the answer. And we need to move beyond that. And that requires a transdisciplinary and a citizen-centered approach to increase the relevance of nature-based solutions and to ensure fairness, acceptance, and ultimately sustainability. So this needs organisation flexibility and support at all levels and facilitating citizen involvement that goes beyond the standard stakeholder interactions at a technocratic compromise level. I'm tempted to quote Sherry Arnstein, her ladder of citizen participation, but we don't have time to go into that. But we do need to engage in the personal sphere of the citizen to ensure buy-in and limit pushback. And we need to listen and to learn as well as teach. And as decision makers, we must take care not to marginalize, especially the most vulnerable in our societies. Through something as simple as creating meeting places to discuss community needs or engaging with children and young people in the planning and construction of nature-based solutions, we can achieve much better. And overall, we need to not only innovate with the technical aspects of nature-based solutions, but push for more wide-reaching and innovative ways to collaborate and develop inclusive climate adaptation and governance. So with those few words, I hope they are of some relevance to the discussions that you're having today. I'm looking forward to the interactions and the discussion that will now take place. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kieran, for those wise words and the European perspective and overview. And we're looking forward to welcoming you back to Glasgow sometime, hopefully very soon. So with that, that concludes the opening session. My task now is to hand over to the next session, which will be chaired by Marcus Collier and hosted by Sean Kelly. So please do enjoy the rest of the summit, and I look forward to meeting you in other sessions. Sean, handing the baton on to you. Thank you.
Well, hello, and thank you very much. I appreciate this. Thank you very much for coming, and welcome to everybody who's joining us. I am delighted to welcome you to the first of a series of high-level summits as part of the Connecting Nature project. My name is Marcus Collier, and I am the coordinator of Connecting Nature from Trinity College in Dublin. And before I introduce the panel and open up for our discussion, allow me just to give you a brief outline of our project, which is the first of, and our summit as well, which is the first of a few summits, as you heard earlier on. And I'd also like to lend my thanks significantly to Emma and Sean for doing a lot of all this work in the last couple of weeks, months, and getting us to where we are now. Connecting Nature is a 5-year, €11.4 million project funded by the European Union Horizon 2020 programme. And we are bringing together cities and businesses, scientists, to devise new ways to bring nature-based solutions into mainstream planning, design, management and governance of cities. We have 31 partners in our project from 16 different countries, as you heard earlier on. And we also have 4 global hubs in Brazil, China, Korea, and the Caucasus, with 2 more in development, which you'll hear more about on Friday. Over the last 4 years, our project team has devised and tested new methods and processes to realize the many co-benefits of nature-based solutions, of nature in cities in general, and also in doing so to derive new innovations. We are part of a larger family of EU-funded nature-based solution projects, some of whom you'll hear from in the next few days. And we are delighted to play a leading part in the growing acceptance of the nature-based solution approach globally. In the Connecting Nature project, we recognize that nature and natural processes can provide solutions to climate pressures, especially in cities. We see the co-creation approach as a key solution to modify our unsustainable behavior. This is the essence of nature-based solutions. And just to quickly update ourselves, what are nature-based solutions? I suppose most of you will understand this, but just to make sure we understand where we're coming from, there are many different definitions of it, but their consensus is that a nature-based solution is those solutions that are inspired by and support nature, that are cost-effective and are capable of providing multiple co-benefits, particularly in cities. These co-benefits include the providing of environmental services like clean air and water, ecological services such as biodiversity and habitat restoration, and promoting social and cultural services such as improved health and well-being and so on, and that Aileen mentioned earlier on. In this summit, we will introduce you to some of the innovations that we are developing and communicating and collaborating about nature-based solutions, and new models for financing for these unique nature-based approaches, and new ways of measuring the effects and impacts of the nature-based solutions in our daily lives. We have, as you heard, 3 frontrunner cities: Glasgow, which we're really grateful for hosting this event, Poznan and Genk. And we are, you will be able to find examples of our work on our website, and in different parts of this event. You'll see it in the expo area. But what we're going to do in the next couple of days is to share with you our learnings from our cities, our small and medium enterprises, or as we're starting to call them, nature-based enterprises, and our scientists. Today we'll be looking a lot at biodiversity and climate change mitigation. And we'll be following it up tomorrow with looking at health and well-being and place-based planning. And we conclude with some looking at nature-based solutions for the green recovery from COVID-19, nature-based skills, employability, and enterprise. So nature-based solutions have a very high potential for reconciling the desire to regreen our cities and derive benefits for communities. But this is a really huge challenge for planners and policymakers. But it also opens up huge opportunities for innovation. We'll start with today's session, where we'll explore the potential of nature-based innovation, and you can convey your comments and questions in the chat box, and we'll do our best to respond, although we're tight for time because of our little glitch earlier on. And I'm delighted to say we've got 4 panelists here with us who have really given generously of their time to discuss nature-based solutions. Duncan Booker, who is Glasgow City Council COP26 Stakeholder Manager, Rachel Cowper from Inspiring Scotland, Kieran Cuff, who you heard from a few minutes ago, who's a member of the European Parliament, and Marianna Sanderson, who is from one of our sibling nature-based solution projects, ReGreen. I have some questions, but please join in the conversation and the chat. So first of all, may I invite my panel, welcome, to introduce themselves. Duncan, if you'd like to say a few words, delighted to hear, and we can get going.
Thanks very much, Marcus, and hello to everyone at today's event. I'm Duncan Booker. It's a Real privilege to participate today. I'm from Glasgow City Council, and I'm currently engaged in the planning to welcome the world and ourselves to COP26 here in Glasgow in November, and especially to use the arrival of that event to add momentum to our existing sustainability ambitions. Looking forward to participating today.
Thank you so much, Duncan. Rachel, if I could have you to say a few words, please.
Certainly. My name is Rachel Cooper, and I lead the Thrive Outdoors team, which is within Inspiring Scotland. And we actively invest and support children to improve their health and well-being, their connectedness to the environment through the use of outdoor and natural spaces. And we have invested in this for 11 years now, and we support outdoor play and outdoor learning investments.
Thank you, Rachel. Apologies for mispronunciation, but that's the Irish version of Cooper is Cowper. There's a road near me.
I answer to both.
Thank you so much. Kieran, if you'd like just to reintroduce in case people have arrived a bit late.
Sure, I'm Kieran Cuff. I'm a Green member of the European Parliament from Dublin, Ireland. My background is in urban regeneration, and I set up a master's in that subject in a university back in my home city.
Thanks, Kieran. And Marianne, if I could have you to say a few words.
Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for letting me in. I'm Marianna Sanderson from Aarhus University in Denmark. I'm an environmental economist working on the valuation of ecosystem services and NBS benefits in both urban and rural settings. And I'm also the pleasure of being the coordinator of ReGreen, one of the family of NBS projects funded by the EU. And ReGreen is about fostering nature-based solutions for equitable, green and healthy urban areas in China and Europe. So we got 6 cities, 3 in China and 3 in Europe. So we're very happy to be here today. Thank you.
Great, and we'll hear more about our reach, our global reach with the nature-based during this throughout the project. And so the first topic, guys, thank you so much for coming again, is we largely accept that cities and urban areas need to adapt in order to reduce the risks, and we're talking about risks from issues like social inequalities, biodiversity loss and climate change. So if I could start with you, Duncan, and the question I would like to just discuss is how can we use innovative nature-based solutions in urban areas to increase the rate of change in a safe and inclusive way?
Thank you very much, Marcus. And that question, I think, really goes to the heart of some of the key aims we've got as host city for COP26, as you've just heard from Councillor Susan Aitkin, our leader. I mean, firstly, that whilst nation states make pledges, it's cities that are delivering on the promise of a low carbon and climate resilient future. And secondly, that sustainability and social justice must go together, particularly for our most vulnerable residents, bringing together that key aspect that Kieran in particular was focusing on around people. And I'm mindful, especially, that the Scottish Government will be launching the final report of its Just Transition Commission just this lunchtime, in fact. And so when we come to think about innovation, I think it's natural we think of innovation in technology. But I would argue most of the technology we need is already on the shelf. It's how we begin to mobilize that through innovation in finance in particular that becomes a bit of a challenge. As well as that, I think innovation in governance comes to the fore, whether the institutions we have are the right ones to face the extraordinary challenges that we're now looking to address as we move from the COVID crisis towards the climate emergency. And I suppose 2 things I'll just say to that, Marcus. First, I think a municipal authority has a key convening role there because these are cross-cutting issues and they're cross-sectoral too. And if we're to bring together residents, communities, businesses and the public sector, you need something with a democratic mandate and a leadership role, like a local authority, like a city, doing the things we've been doing for centuries with municipal activism to the fore, with nature-based solutions as being that next key step forward. And the second is about the link that people have already been making to COVID, that you're talking in Glasgow, a city with 70% of residents live in flats with no access to gardens, 50% don't have cars. So the issue of green space and access to that, the issue of wheeling, walking and cycling during and after the pandemic hopefully has been addressed, becomes all the more significant. And I think the innovation we're looking for will be driven, especially as we look, I suppose, at engineering solutions, hard hats, so to speak, and social policy. And the trick, I think, is to bring both of those together. One final thing, I think, to mention, Mental Health Awareness Week in Scotland this year, in May, will be focused on nature. That's the key theme. And I think that sums up much of the debate we've been having about the multiple benefits that nature-based solutions give our cities and our partners in this project.
Yes, that's thank you. There's a lot going on there, and Marianne, if I could turn to you in terms of inspiring Scotland. I mean, maybe you could give us a few insights there as well.
Yes, when I think about how to really increase the rate of change, I think what is really important is a strategic approach and vision and leadership. Without that push from the municipalities, but also from the national and international level to enable this development, things are just going to be very difficult to have the bottom up to make that change. So I think really the visions and leaderships, and especially the systemic approach to really change the ecological functioning of urban and the peri-urban areas is really important. And in that, I think biodiversity is really key. You also mentioned biodiversity loss, and I think that in Regreen we also work along those lines, that biodiversity is at the core of NBS, both because biodiversity has been shown to improve well-being and mental health for people, but it also in the longer term helps the resilience of the ecosystem services and the ecosystem that we depend upon and we want to build up in the urban areas. So biodiversity is really important, and how to make sure that we don't become too technical and focusing on one challenge like carbon storage, and then we opt for the fast and near-term benefits, but we actually lose out of an opportunity. And in addition to that, funds, how to secure funds. Like in one of the cities in Regreen, Urban Living Labs in Aarhus in Denmark, the municipality last year decided to spend a lot of money over the next 8 years on nature-based solutions and improving nature experiences for people in the city. And that really changes the whole setup for the city of how to deal with that. And that suddenly comes as one batch. So a lot of planning suddenly has to be made differently across different departments in the municipality. So also, I would say, being ready for the funds is also an important aspect.
Thank you. Rachel, you have a different insight or a complementary insight from your organization, perhaps?
Yes, possibly slightly different, but actually very aligned, shall we say, in that the work we do, and particularly in Glasgow, is very much focused on that equity of opportunity. So when we look at biodiversity loss, and when we look at access to green space, and when we look at the statistics and evidence about the pandemic and how people have come more so to value their green and open spaces, there is something there that we feel is quite crucial about then how we support the young children, the younger generation, the next generation, to have both a positive mindset and experience of accessing outdoor and open spaces, but the equitable opportunity to do so. And therefore something that we believe quite heavily in, and we've been working very closely with Glasgow City Council on, is the use of public, open, green, brown and grey spaces to engage children in those spaces through play or through learning, through the creation of more outdoor nurseries, very similar to what our Scandinavian colleagues have as normal, to encourage both the health benefits that come from being outside and being more physically active and breathing that fresher air, but that emotional connection and the value that develops from being exposed to it, rather than the green spaces being something they don't have the opportunity to engage in, or that only others have the opportunity to engage in, and therefore bringing in from the earliest of years a sense of belonging and a sense of value to those spaces. And I think that's a crucial part of the equation, and Glasgow's most definitely taken that bull by the horns and is driving for some very interesting investment and progress in that area.
It's clear, even from the two earlier presentations at the start, and just from what we've heard so far, equity, leadership, financing, these are already, we're not even an hour into this summit, and already we're starting to hit the high notes of where the key. So I'm going to ask Kieran maybe to maybe speak to that in terms of, let's just say, the things like equity and leadership. We'll come to financing on Friday. We have lots of news on that, but we can talk about this. We heard our house is investing, the government of Scotland is investing for green space and open spaces. You've got the place-based planning and so on. So, Kieran, has with your planning hat on, or with your MEP hat on, I suppose, leadership and equity, these are coming out more and more and more these days, and I'm just wondering if you have comments on that.
Yeah, I mean, look, you do need leadership, but you need engagement and you need education with citizens and with communities. And I think it is imperative to centre citizens in the discussion, and also to focus on areas deprived of investment, which are often lacking in nature. We've done that mapping in my own home city of Dublin, and there's a direct link between income and access to nature, and it's not good. So I think we do simply need to focus our investments on areas that are lacking in nature. But it's not just about, obviously, top-down solutions. We need to listen to communities' needs and work with them in devising solutions. And particularly when we talk about collaborative planning between civil servants, between public servants and citizens, we're dealing with power asymmetries, which can frustrate interactions, buy-in and overall solutions. And there's often legacies there of underinvestment. So there can be mistrust, there can be fear, and there can be a reluctance from many communities to engage. But as people are saying, engaging with children is a crucial element on things as simple as tree planting, and not just saying come on out and plant a tree. Maybe asking kids what kind of a tree do they want to see planted, and getting them to plant their favorite tree. So meaningful engagement on decision making with communities, with children, I think is really, really crucial in all of this.
Thank you. Yes, meaningful engagement. That's part of what we're trying to do, and some of the innovations you might hear in the next few days from us and from some of the other projects. I suppose I know we're a little bit tight for time, but this does bring, you're an international project. Glasgow is reaching out to the world in November. Well, it's been reaching out to the world for a long time, but November is when it's coming. The world is reaching out to Glasgow. And I'm just wondering, Duncan, in terms of the international side of support for innovation, maybe, how do you feel, or where, and I know there's a lot of politics has gone on in the UK, we're all very aware of this, but, leaving that aside for just a moment, just in terms of the support that is needed on a human level from our international colleagues, how do you see that playing out in COP, but also in general for Glasgow?
Yeah, I think that urban policymaking perspective is the one where we're, joining with our peers around the world, and I suppose adding our shoulder to the wheel of those ambitions we've got. Especially, I think, around issues. I mean, I won't talk about finance because I know it's coming another day, but maybe about the value that our economic systems put on nature and the extent to which it features in our risk registers and our formal approaches. I'm actually speaking with representatives of the insurance industry this afternoon, and it's really interesting because they're referencing nature-based solutions more and more. They're talking about the Dasgupta review on the economics of biodiversity, and of course, with that comes that real possibility of transfers from the developed parts of the world to the global south to support nature-based solutions in other parts of the world for all our advantage, including the prevention of further, zoonotic diseases coming across at its most basic link to COVID as well. One final thing, just following up what Kieran said there about young people and things, about engagement communities. I was very fortunate to chair an event the other day on young people and climate change. And they talked again and again about the abstract nature of climate change, what a ton of CO2 does or doesn't look like. It doesn't look like anything, in short. They talked about the need to make things tangible and tactile. And that's where the connection with nature comes in. And, you've heard one or two quotations from previous speakers. If I can add one from memory, I think from Jane Jacobs, she said something like, great cities are meant for everyone when they've been built by everyone. And I think that's one of the key things that post-COVID and with nature-based solutions at its heart, places like Glasgow and our peer cities are going to want to be able to show the rest of the world and to engage with them beyond COP26 and really to provide that sustainable urban place for our people.
Right, and thank you for that. And actually, some of the comments are coming in terms of what we're saying here about is resonating a lot with what's happening in Glasgow. Rachel, I suppose if I could just turn back to you in terms of you were mentioning about engaging with schools, engaging with children, and so on. From an international level, are there examples that we could use in that sphere for that you've come across, or that, I'm sorry, I'm throwing you under the bus here, but are there examples that you might be able to point us towards? Oh, I can't.
Scandinavian colleagues, but also further afield, like Canada, and they managed to do all manner of wonderful things. But if we just reflect on Glasgow for a second, in the realms of how we engage our children when they're 3, 4, 5, outdoor nurseries or forest kindergartens, whatever you want to call them, is certainly something that both mitigates carbon, because you don't have the built environment, you don't have the tarmac parks for teachers, you use urban and local green spaces to deliver the full care that's required for the children, and it meets within all the government regulations and regulatory guidances in this country. But then you can look at maybe what happens in primary schools or what happens in secondary schools. And outdoor primary schools do exist in Scandinavian countries and in Canada. And there they manage to exist when they really do have bears in the woods, and we don't have that. But certainly when we look to secondary schools, what can be done there? And this yet beavers maybe. But when we look at secondary schools, there are options there again from Canada and America where these things are starting to look, and the learning and the education is based and rooted in the environment. The curriculum is withheld to, and the children come out with a significantly improved health and well-being alongside their attainment issues and that engagement and understanding of the real world. So I think there's plenty to look at. It just depends how brave we are.
Very interesting, and you'll find out more. Our city of Poznan has been converting kindergartens from post-Soviet concrete type playgrounds into nature-based playgrounds, and so we'll hear more about that either this summit or the next one. I think that's very, very important, and also that both countries are freezing in the wintertime. They still go outside. Marianne, speaking of coming from a cold country, in terms of the international perspective, maybe the European perspective, I know you're doing a lot of work with China. How does that influence the type of work we're doing for nature-based, scaling out nature-based solutions, things like leadership and equity? Is that coming up in your project?
Well, it's definitely a scale issue, because the urban living labs we have in China is Beijing, Shanghai, and Ningbo, really, really big cities with a different level of challenges than what we know from Europe, but it's along the way a lot of the same solutions that we need. So what we do in ReGreen is we start with looking at the drivers of that change, looking over time, how has the urban morphology changed, and we do fine resolution mapping of what are the different objects in the city today, and from that we go on to working with scenarios of how can this be changed at a city scale, taking into account different types of NBS that bring along a multitude of ecosystem services. So we look at noise and flooding, urban heat island, biodiversity, recreation. And then we work with the cities to look at the most optimal locations for that, and looking into where are the different socioeconomic groups living, what we talked about before, a lack of access, or where the hotspots of challenges are located. But also looking at the trade-offs between the different services that you will obtain. And if I may, I know time is short, but also going back to the education, what you talked about, there's this SchoolNet at EU level, where they are building in on a platform NBS for teaching curriculum for teachers. And also we have a whole work package dedicated to educational work with a lab in LNAB in Sweden, where young children, primary school children, and before come out and co-create the ideal play environment for children, but also to see how can we transfer this to the more urban settings. What is it that children like and need in terms of nature? And there's a lot of acceptance from teachers and adults in terms of what can we allow our children to get muddy and maybe risk falling down a tree. So.
Sure, I totally get. So buy-in. Now I would love to go to Kieran for a few words, but I've been told we've gone over time, Kieran. I'm so sorry, but I'd say you'd probably be talking about buy-in and engagement, and that level of collaborative approaches needs to work at all scales and all levels. I'm sorry for putting words in your mouth, but I know the work you've done in the past. So look, I know this was quick and cheerful, but I think we've got across some really key points here, and we really managed to sum up some of the challenges and opportunities for innovating in the nature-based space in Europe. So on behalf of myself and Connecting Nature Project, and thank you so much, all of you, for coming. We'll be coming back to you, and we'll no doubt at the next summits. But best luck in November, guy, with the COP. But also thank you so much. And I think I'll turn.
And thanks all for joining us for this session on how innovation in relation to nature-based solutions can help cities adapt to the big challenges of climate change. As Sean mentioned, I'm Stuart Connaught from University of East London in the UK, and I'm your host for this session this morning. I'm lucky enough to be joined by a great team of presenters who will be introducing you to the diverse challenges posed by climate change across different city and geographical contexts, and presenting a range of approaches that are being used to mainstream nature-based solutions as solutions to these big climate change challenges. The presentations provide diverse perspectives on mainstreaming nature-based solutions, including a local authority approach, an SME approach, and a collaborative approach between a local development agency and an SME. Hopefully you'll find the topics interesting and stimulating enough to prompt some questions, which you can add to the chat. And as Sean said, the chat will be monitored, and we'll be selecting some of the questions for a panel discussion at the end of the presentation. So do get typing, don't be shy. Right, but before we delve into those presentations and questions, we're going to do a bit of scene setting with an introduction to the Connecting Nature framework. All of the partners presenting in this session are partners on the EU Horizon 2020 funded project Connecting Nature, and the framework developed in the project has been supporting their work to mainstream nature-based solutions. So we thought it would be useful to give you all a bit of insight into the framework. To do this, we're going to start the session with a short video from our Connecting Nature project partners at Drift.
The framework has 3 phases: planning, delivery, and stewardship. In the planning phase, it's key to define the goals of the solutions and consider what innovations that will take. The delivery phase is all about the implementation of the solutions. The third phase, which is not to be overlooked, is stewardship. Because how can a solution have impact if you don't manage, maintain, or monitor it? Each phase has 7 separate elements which cities need to consider when shaping their nature-based solution. These 7 elements are technical solutions, governance, finance and business models, entrepreneurship, co-production, reflexive monitoring, and impact assessment. The framework is not a step-by-step guide because it's best to work on your nature-based solutions through an iterative process. You don't necessarily have to go from A to Z, and the steps involved in this journey are interrelated. Now, let's dive into it. What do these phases and elements look like in everyday practice for European cities? Co-production in the planning phase, for example, can be done like in Poznan, in Poland. To co-produce a natural playground for a school, they held a visioning workshop with the kids, teachers, and parents of that school. The results of the workshop were input for the designer that worked on the nature-based solution. Rethinking governance also has to be started as early as the planning phase. What conditions and skills are needed to make connections across sectors to realise that one vision? When the city of Malaga in Spain started working on their nature-based solutions, they formed a cluster with public sector parties, knowledge institutes, NGOs, and businesses. The cluster exchanges knowledge, shares opportunities, and raises awareness. It's also wise to include the element of finance and business modelling in planning. For the Grow Chapel Community Garden project in Drumchapel, Glasgow, that meant getting various stakeholders together for a nature-based solutions business model canvas workshop. This session, held in February 2020, helped to sketch a long-term business model for the garden. While all 7 are important at every phase of development, we highlight 2 elements for the delivery phase. The first is reflexive monitoring, a process of continuous, real-time adaptive monitoring and assessment. The Connecting Nature frontrunner city of Glasgow found this messy at first, but it gave their core team from city government critical insight into how to replicate a successful demonstration project in other parts of the city. The second is entrepreneurship. How can we stimulate new markets and business opportunities through nature-based solutions? This element of the framework inspired the city of Genk in Belgium to expand the horizon of their Steamer Valley project. What initially started as a project to improve poor water quality in a river valley expanded to the Steamer Deals program. This program marries local business, social entrepreneurship, and nature conservation. A nearby ice cream parlour, for example, developed a new flavour using local honey. With support from the city of Genk, this led to increased footfall in the new area, boosting the local economy. Now we're at the stewardship phase. Again, all 7 elements play a role, but we're discussing 2 in particular. One of those is impact assessment, the continuous and long-term effort to ensure viability of nature-based solutions. The Glasgow Connecting Nature team developed a nature-based solution dashboard. The dashboard makes all sorts of data like social, economic, and environmental data more accessible to support decision-making. Technical solutions aren't just part of the planning and delivery phase. Once a nature-based solution has been implemented, ensuring the tech supports the original goal is an ongoing process. The Poznan Garden mentioned earlier isn't just a space for education and recreation. It also contributes to soil unsealing, increases biodiversity, and provides relief from heat stress. Making the tech work to deliver these benefits requires more than just building something and moving on. It's an ongoing endeavour. These were just some examples and applications of the Connecting Nature framework. Are you curious to experience how the Connecting Nature framework can help your city or community? Go to www.connectingnature.eu or get in touch with us. This framework is part of the Connecting Nature project, a collaboration between 26 European partners including the Glasgow City Council, Trinity College Dublin, and DRIFT, the Dutch Research Institute for Transitions. Connecting Nature is funded by the Horizon 2020 Framework Programme of the European Union.
Okay, hopefully in addition to a bit of scene setting for this session, that gives you a good introduction to the framework and how it might be relevant and useful to you. So please do check the framework out on our website after this session. We'll put a link in the chat for anyone who wants to find it and find out more. Within Connecting Nature, I'm one of the team that developed the technical solutions element of the framework. The technical solutions element focuses on the planning, delivery, and stewardship of the technical aspects of nature-based solution implementation, and how appropriate consideration of these implementation phases can support the realization of locally contextualized and multifunctional benefits. This morning's session is loosely based around this theme of technical solutions, and in the session we are going to be hearing from Gillian Dick from Glasgow City Council, Christian Garcia from Pro Malaga, and Gerardo Gonzalez from BioAzul. Then finally, Jonathan Muller from Helix Pflanzensysteme. Sorry, my pronunciation got worse as I went on there. About their approaches to mainstreaming nature-based solutions for urban areas. First up, we have Gillian. Gillian's a spatial planning manager and is disruptor-in-chief on connecting nature. She's always asking the probing questions and keeping us on our toes in terms of pursuing nature-based solution innovation excellence. Gillian is presenting Glasgow Council's open space strategy approach to delivering locally contextualised nature-based solutions. Over to you, Gillian.
Hi, I'm Gillian Dick, Spatial Planning Manager at Glasgow City Council, and I'm going to take you through some of the stuff that we've been doing with our open space strategy within the Connecting Nature project and how we use nature-based solutions to help us with climate change. As this is a pre-record, if you've any questions, drop them in the chat and I'll give you the links to any of the documents I've mentioned or try and answer them as we go through. Otherwise, sit back with your tea or coffee and enjoy the little chats. So, what are nature-based solutions? Well, in the Connecting Nature project, we've come up with this handy framework that you can see on the screen at the minute. What we kind of discovered was that a lot of the projects were very good at doing the planning and the delivery, but always seemed to forget about the stewardship, or you could get the money for the planning, or you could get the money for the delivery, but you couldn't get the money to do that long-term sustainable maintenance or management. It's also that some projects had a focus on few things. So they maybe thought about the technical solution, or they maybe thought about the financing, but didn't think about the governance, or didn't think about the conversations they were going to have with communities. So what the framework that we developed within Connecting Nature tries to do is say that you always need to think about the technical solutions, the governance, the financing, whether you can make businesses out of this, is there an entrepreneurship there or an enterprise, how you work with communities, co-produce it, that you need moments to step back and think and reflect on what you've actually done and learn from those bumps in the road that you've come against, and that you should always be doing some impact monitoring and assessment. So that's collecting data and using that data, hopefully on a geographical basis, so on GIS, for instance, to help tell the stories and help you make better, more informed decision making. So it's not all just about biodiversity, although we're trying to improve biodiversity as we go along. So to put it another way, Stuart, who's chairing this session, has come up with some handy kind of thought processes that you need to ask yourself as you go through. So does your project or your policy or the action that you want to take, does it use nature or natural processes? Does it provide or improve social benefits? Does it provide or improve economic benefits? Does it provide or improve environmental benefits? And does it have a net benefit on biodiversity? Now, my way of thinking about it, I say in my head, does the thing I want to do no harm? So does it do no harm to community cohesion or that community itself? Do you bring a community with you, whether that's the human community or the habitat or species community? Do you do no harm to the health and well-being, the mental health and well-being of a community? For instance, do you do no harm to the economy? Do you do no harm to the environment? And by default, do you do no harm to the biodiversity? Now, that's not saying that you don't do anything in order not to do any harm, but it's trying to get you to think about what can I do to improve this so that I am not having a big gain for the economy, but at the same time making a serious damage to the biodiversity or the environment or the community to which I'm doing this economic uplift. So actually, you're trying to bring everything up at the same time. Another great way of looking at it with that place-based approach and using your nature-based solutions lens is to kind of look at it in the round. This is another great diagram that says it's all about those societal challenges that you're dealing with, and you're trying to balance those trade-offs. So you're trying to design at scale as well. So rather than doing lots of little things, you're trying to make sure that something is a solution that can be grown across a city, for instance, or in a community or in an area. You want to make sure it's economically feasible, that it has that biodiversity net gain, and that it's inclusive governance. You take communities with you. You want to be adaptive in your management decisions as you go through. And by doing that, hopefully you'll mainstream those actions and you'll make them sustainable. So if we have a look about it, it's all about place. Now that's not anything new. So in the 60s, Jane Jacob talked about dull, boring places. Why would you fight for them? Why would you be interested in something if you didn't like it? And Patrick Geddes, over 100 years before that, said places were about the right folk for the right place at the right time. So it's about engaging with those places. And in Scotland, we now use the place standard. And you can see one of the diagrams on the right-hand side. So that's placestandard.scot, to allow us to have those conversations with communities, whether it's professional communities or just communities of people that live in an area, about their lived experience of living in that area. So if we take that into our development plan and we start looking at our nature-based solutions and how they flow through, we have the Glasgow City Development Plan, adopted in 2017. We're aiming, as most development plans are doing, for healthy, high quality places and compact city form, because we're highly urbanised. And everywhere else in the world is saying we want it to be vibrant, we want it to be thriving, we want it connected, and we want it green. We have an overarching placemaking policy and a sustainable spatial strategy and 10 supporting policies underneath that. A lot of them rely on using the open space, whether it's grey, blue or green, to kind of deal with some of the issues that they're looking at. So we then have our open space strategy, which was adopted this time last year. And the nice, healthy diagram kind of says it's not just about the green, because my bugbear is everybody just thinks, oh, open space is just green. It's actually about the blue and the grey as well. So the biggest open space in Glasgow is the River Clyde. And our second biggest open space is our footways and our cycleways and our canal paths, and then it's our green. So this diagram says it's all about all three of them. And it's about how they connect and how you can use other things that might be described as green network or green infrastructure to deliver some of this open space. And you'll note that it's not just about what's on the ground. It can also be vertical open spaces like green walls and green roofs, and it could be up at height as well. So it's to start thinking in a different way about open spaces and what they can do when you're trying to be climate adaptive. And if you look at how you do an open space strategy, we had to be cognizant of the planning context, both at a national level, which is what you can see in the yellow box, and at our regional level, which is what you can see in the orange box. We also had to be cognizant of where the city was going, which is the purple box at the top, which includes the strategic plan, the community plan, and our climate and ecological emergencies that were declared recently. We then need to take cognizance of the national legislation and European legislation and other major strategies, all shown in the red box. MGSDP is the flooding, so it's the Metropolitan Glasgow Strategic Drainage Plan, for instance. And then there's a close relationship because it informs or it relies on information and data coming through from the local biodiversity action programme, but it can inform things like food growing or how we manage the spaces that we actually own as a city, for instance. We break that down into three categories of a livable, healthy and resilient city. And we're trying to look at the needs now and what those future needs will be. So if you look at a livable city, it's about the quality, quantity and accessibility of the space, the lived experience in that space. So do people feel welcome? Do they feel safe? Do they feel they can use that space? And also how the city centre and those grey spaces are used as well. When we're thinking about healthy, it's about play and sport and learning and education and growing spaces, but also about how we use those spaces to improve air quality, noise quality, reduce heat islands, etc. And then resilience is picking up the more kind of usual suspects for the climate adaptiveness of open space. So can we use it for flooding, enhancing biodiversity, connecting those habitats, mitigation and adaptation, and how do we use those blue spaces as well? All of that will allow us to look at what spaces we want to retain, where we need new open spaces, how we redefine some of them, and are some of them redundant in the wrong place, and can we swap them around for other things? All of that lays through into a vision that's going to be mapped and interactive, but it allows us to start making evidence-based decisions on where we want things to go, like, for instance, where can we get energy out of the ground below parks that would allow us to improve that park, or where could we allow a park to flood instead of the housing to flood, for instance, if you're thinking about climate adaptation. A lot of that's now coming through in our climate emergency implementation plan that's just finished its consultation. It has 5 themes. I'm going to focus on the 5th theme at the end of this, but theme 1 on communication and community empowerment links quite intrinsically to COP26 coming in November. It's talking about placemaking, it's talking about the transport strategy, just and inclusive, and theme 2 is talking about a fairer Scotland. a climate risk register so we know where those climate risks are and we can therefore be adaptive and mitigate against them, trying to future-proof the city, which you can do with a lot of nature-based solution ideas, circular economy, which again ties into some of the stuff coming through the nature-based solution framework, which talked about entrepreneurship and enterprise, and how do we align with the UN SDGs. When we look at theme 3 of a well-connected and thriving city, it's about the relaunch of sustainable Glasgow. Again, it's about the open space strategy and a lot of what it can do around energy, for instance, so park power, links into the local heat and energy strategy and links into circular economy ideas around again, and also into the Cleaner Air for Scotland strategy that's coming out of the Scottish Government. Theme 4 about health and well-being is about those spaces for places, those spaces where people feel safe. It's about food growing, it's about flood alleviation, etc. The final theme, which is green recovery, this is a page straight out of the Climate Emergency Implementation Plan. You would expect to see the open space strategy front and centre there. It's also about sustainable transport. It's about the learning that's coming from connecting nature and how we can do that place-based approach with a nature-based solution. And it's about how we link into Climate Ready Clyde. Just going to leave you with a quote that's actually in the Climate Emergency Plan. And what I want you to focus on is what the European Commission is saying. It defines nature-based solutions as those which are inspired and supported by nature, which are cost-effective and simultaneously provide environmental, social and economic benefits and help to build resilience. In using and embedding NBS in Glasgow, we're making a just transition to a cleaner, greener economy, moving away from a dependence on hydrocarbons, and we're hopeful that it will make sure that we're more resilient as a city, more climate adaptive, and we can mitigate against the climate shocks that are coming towards us and therefore have these resilience communities. Thank you, and I'll hand you back to Stu.
Thanks for that, Gillian. Really inspiring stuff. And don't forget to the audience, if you do have questions related to Gillian's presentation or more generally about the framework, do add them to the chat. I know Gillian will be busy behind the scenes answering and discussing questions appearing, but there'll also be opportunity to put some forward for the Q&A at the end of this session. Right, so next up we have Christian Garcia from Pro Malaga, a local development agency in Malaga, and Gerardo Gonzalez from the water management and water treatment SME BioAzul. Together, they represent 2 key driving forces behind nature-based solution adoption and mainstreaming in Malaga, and they're going to be presenting their collaborative approach towards this aim. Over to you guys.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Christian, and I am from Malaga. Today I am going to introduce you, along with my colleague Gerardo, what are the big climate challenges in Malaga and how the city is trying to face those challenges. First, a few key facts from the city of Malaga. Malaga is a medium-sized city of 578,000 inhabitants. It is the 6th largest city in Spain and the 46th in the European Union. As for its economic activity, Malaga has been able to develop tourism, textile, and significant activity in IT with the Malaga Tech Park. To keep developing economical activities, the city of Malaga relies on ProMalaga. ProMalaga is a city council company that works on business promotion, job creation, and talent attraction. ProMalaga promotes the entrepreneurial spirit, business impulse, technological investments in R&D, and innovation projects. The city of Malaga has some important climate issues due to climate change patterns. In recent years, there have been numerous changes in temperatures and rainfall. Overall temperatures have increased. The number of days with high temperatures have also increased, as well as the maximum temperature, reaching new level almost every year. The same is happening with precipitations. The city has been experiencing floods due to torrential rains and damage due to extreme weather events, flooding of coastal areas and damage due to rising sea levels, increase in droughts. Those changes affect directly the environment and biodiversity, the primary sector, the urban environment, health, and tourism. The situation in Malaga is worrying to such an extent that the City Council recognized the city's climatic emergency in 2019. In response to those climate changes, the City of Malaga has developed several plans, being the Plan for Climate Alicia the most ambitious one. Alicia is a comprehensive dynamic plan in 4 parts with strategic and concrete action lines. The plan is linked to the Urban Agenda Strategy, the SDGs, and the Mobility Plan, all within the framework of the City Strategic Plan. In total, Alicia has 40 strategic lines and 98 specific actions in each of the sections of the climate plan. In Section 1, Urban Model and Mobility, 11 strategic lines and 35 actions. In the second part, Urban Metabolism, 14 strategic lines and 29 actions. In the third part, Biodiversity, 6 strategic lines and 15 actions. And in the fourth part, Social Cohesion and Governance, 8 strategic lines and 19 actions. Alicia has been elaborated between City Council technicians, scientists, administrations, private companies, associations, and citizens in an effort to represent all layers of the population. The City of Malaga has also developed a plan for sustainable mobility 2020-2050 with the ambitious goal to reach zero carbon emissions by 2050. Finally, the city has subscribed to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Some other specific plans are also being developed by the city, as well as the interest to develop new concepts and activity sectors, like the nature-based solutions. As far as nature-based solutions, the City of Malaga is just reaching the concept. Nature-based solution is a new concept in Malaga, even though the city has been able to develop so far a few nature-based solutions as well as to create an NBS cluster for the future. Some of the examples of NBS developed in Malaga are the San Telmo's Aqueduct, the Vertical Garden in Pericon Square, the Great Coastal Path along the seashore. This path will reach 178 kilometers long once finished. It will run through all the Malaga coastal line from east to west. And to finish, the UMA, the University of Malaga, has developed green islands and paths to fight the heat island effects in the city. The cluster was created in 2018. It is made up of public and private institutions, academia, and NGOs in an example of public-private collaboration. Its purpose is to accelerate implementation of NBS in Malaga, exchange information on innovation, raise awareness with the wider public about products and services, advise the city in projects like Alice and the Green Ring, and create new jobs. An example of SME in the cluster is BioAzul. I will now let my colleague Gerardo from BioAzul talk about the role of SMEs. Gerardo, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Christian. If we look into detail to some of the city action plans already introduced, we can see that water management is clearly embedded as a strategic line to adapt to climate change. Just as an example, the urban agenda refers specifically to the necessity of using alternative water sources, such as treated wastewater. The Alicia Plan for Climate Change also identifies key actions to improve water management and efficient use, while exploring other concepts such as circular economy. And also the City Strategic Plan 2020 has set the priority of innovating and optimizing our integrated water management. Coming back to the use of alternative water sources, I would like to point out that our country is leading the reuse of wastewater in Europe and holds the 5th position in terms of treatment capacity for reuse already installed. This translates into almost 11% of the treated wastewater being reused in Spain, compared to around 2.5% in Europe. Other EU countries like Cyprus or Malta are the front runners with 90 and 60% of treated wastewater reuse, respectively. Since 2007, there is a Spanish royal decree acting as a legal framework for the reuse of treated wastewater in urban, agricultural, or recreational activities. The reuse in certain nature-based solutions is also considered in the framework. For instance, in Andalusia, our region, there are almost 700 cubic hectometers of wastewater treated annually, which represent a huge potential for reuse. This is even more relevant in coastal areas like Malaga, where wastewater is usually discharged to the sea after treatment.
Good morning, everyone.
Tailored solutions for waste to treat and reuse wastewater from a small municipality located in Malaga, wastewater reuse, respectively. Since 2007, there is a Spanish royal decree acting as a legal framework for the reuse of treated wastewater in urban, agricultural, or recreational activities. The reuse in certain nature-based solutions is also considered in the framework. For instance, in Andalusia, our region, there are almost 700 cubic hectometers of wastewater treated annually, which represent a huge potential for reuse. This is even more relevant in coastal areas like Malaga, where wastewater is usually discharged to the sea after treatment, which means there is a net loss of potential resources. So what is Biodiversity doing, and how does it contribute to achieving those strategic lines I mentioned before? Biodiversity is an engineering and technological consultancy mainly focused on the development of eco-innovative and sustainable solutions for urban and industrial water management, especially treatment and reuse, while recovering resources applying circular economy principles. We offer tailored solutions for wastewater treatment and reuse based on technologies that result from the work carried out in research, development, and innovation projects. And one of the aspects that differentiates our level of competence is our capacity to design and adapt the technical solutions to each client's requirements, always providing the best solution for a specific problem. And this is one of our technical solutions, the rich water technology, which was developed in the frame of an European project. This technical solution was implemented to treat and reuse wastewater from a small municipality located in Malaga, and it consists of an integrated system of water treatment and irrigation module, which can provide 150 cubic meters of treated wastewater per day. We mainly have experience in the agricultural use of the effluent, irrigating subtropical crops in this project, but other uses could be considered, contributing to the implementation and maintenance of nature-based solutions like green areas, urban forests, or community gardens. This technical solution provides a high-quality effluent that meets regulatory standards as certified last year with the European Environmental Technology Verification. To conclude, I would like to highlight the importance of designing solutions considering the local context and needs. In this scenario, there is a strong market demand for subtropical products, but at the same time, the production is clearly limited by the lack of water for farmers to cultivate such crops. A common vision of all the actors involved is crucial and must include municipalities, irrigation communities and farmers, local action groups, private companies, and research organizations. In fact, the high commitment from these local actors has translated into the creation of an operational group as one of the initiatives from the European Innovation Partnership for Agriculture, in order to continue with this innovative solution. Rich Water was also selected by the Water Europe platform as a water-oriented living lab, acting as an instrument to bring research and innovation to the community and the agricultural sector, and therefore helping the local economy. All these efforts were recognized last year by the provincial government, and Biosur and the Rich Water Solution was awarded in the category of Best SME Contributing to Climate Change Adaptation in Malaga. And that is all from our side. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks for that, both. A really different perspective on the challenge of climate change and how you are working, particularly collaborating towards addressing them. Last, but by no means least, we have Jonathan Muller. Jonathan is an architect and managing director of Helix Pflanzensysteme, an urban greening specialist company based in Germany. Jonathan is one of the world's wonderful innovators, creating nature-based solutions for any urban location. He'll be presenting some of these innovative approaches to both designing and financing nature-based solutions. Over to you, Jonathan.
Hi everyone, my name is Jonathan Muller from Helix Pflanzen in Germany. I'm very delighted to be speaking to you today on problem solving with green infrastructure, nature-based urban heat island mitigation ideas from Germany. I'm an architect and now the managing director of the company Helix Pflanzensysteme. We focus on planning and implementing functional nature-based solutions, mostly in urban environments, with a clear focus on vertical green walls and gardens. Our background is producing plants. I'm the 4th generation owner, and we've been producing millions of plants every year in 3 locations in Germany. The last 10 years, roughly, we've been focusing more as well on vertical greenery, on urban spaces, no matter if it's bigger structures like parking garages or small interventions on squares. We pretty much have a solution for all sorts of problems in the urban context. We do a lot of maintenance, planning, and taking care of plants. And just recently we've launched a green tram station or a bus station, as well as renting out mobile green installations to communities all over the place. The reason why I want to speak to you today is because, as an architect, I focus mostly on urban areas and what kind of stress is being caused to them. We all know that in a very gray and concrete city, there's, a lack of rainwater retention. There's poor air quality because of cars and other engines. There's a lack of cooling, shading, evaporation, and so on. And one solution for these issues that we're facing every day in urban areas is through nature-based solutions. And the European Commission defines nature-based solutions as solutions to societal changes that are inspired and supported by nature, which are cost-effective and provide environmental, social, and economic benefits to help build resilience. Our products are nature-based solutions, and in combination with grey infrastructure, there's a hybrid system that's called, or that we call green infrastructure, that improves resilience to climate impacts. So if we go back to this slide just now and look at what green can do to urban spaces, it will improve air quality because plants have the availability to do so. Because green spaces work as noise reductions, as they don't give back echo of sounds as easily as concrete spaces. And we all know that rainwater can be collected and be used and evaporated through green systems. So there's a lot of good things that can, work in improving urban areas. And that's kind of why I'm here today. I want to maybe inspire you to, solve problems through green infrastructure by telling you 3 stories that we've experienced to give you an inside look into our planning processes and how we go about in these kind of products. I do want to start with the Green Living Room in Ludwigsburg, Germany. A few years back, we were part of a EU-funded research program called TURAS, and the region of Stuttgart in South Germany, where we located as well, they set out a call saying, all right, we have 180 communities in our region. Is there anybody who wants to join this project where we can try and actually build a green wall to, figure out all these positive effects of nature-based solutions? Because the region of Stuttgart today is already having increasingly a lot of days of thermal stress, and it's been predicted that in 50 years or so, this number will keep on constantly rising. So we have to start right now to set an example of what green infrastructure can bring to cities. The city of Ludwigsburg said, all right, this sounds very interesting. You know, we have this parking garage, so an underground parking space where we cannot plant any trees on top of. Is there any way you could use this rather tiny square to do this green intervention, this green nature-based solution? And with the help of an architect, Ferdinand Ludwig, we went about on designing sort of a green space, what we now call the green living room. And we always knew what kind of attributes this green living room should have. It should become a social meeting point for the people of Ludwigsburg. It should provide shading because it's a very hot square where nobody wants to spend time. And through shading, you know, people can experience cooling. Obviously, it should be a habitat for animals and plants, and function as a water reservoir. After planning, we went on building. We have this product where we can pre-plant plants and then stack on top of each other, just like a Lego brick system. And it's absolutely brilliant. It's, you know, it's been 5 years being there, and every year it gets bigger and bigger. The city of Ludwigsburg even puts out these chairs in the summer, every morning. And at the end of the day, they always collect them in the green living room because that's where people want to sit. They don't want to sit on a hot square in summer. They want to sit in the green spaces, in the cool, shady areas. So this project has been a brilliant example of how to design with nature-based solutions. We've put around 7,000 plants into these walls and roofs. And all that, you know, on top of this parking garage where you weren't able to build any trees. 140 square meters of green space has been brought back. And so, you know, we kind of figured it's a brilliant story to bring about. And because the project was sort of coming to an end, the research project, and there was a bit of budget left to do some more with it. And because the idea was so good, we thought, how can we make this green living room in Ludwigsburg mobile, flexible, to bring to all the partner cities or partners so they can have the same positive experience from it as we did in the city of Ludwigsburg. And as weird as the idea sounds, we thought, okay, how can we put this on a truck and ship it out to a place? We went back into designing. That's pretty much what happened 2016. We've come up with the mobile green living room. You could easily load it up on a truck and then ship it out to all sorts of places. And we've been doing that ever since. We've now built over 20 of these mobile green living rooms, and they are being rented out to cities so they can use them for any sort of events or just to promote sort of a climate adaptation change program or whatever they want to transport on it. It's very easy. It's a very easy tool for cities because you just set it up. You don't need to build something actually. And this is meant as a great starting point to have a conversation about green infrastructure in cities because people can experience it. And we have one client, the city of Esslingen, where they said, okay, this is brilliant. We want to try it out. We have this square in front of the train station that nobody uses because it's super hot. There's no shading. And, you know, as you can see with those arrows, people sort of dug into the city through shaded spaces, but the square was completely empty. And once we put the mobile green living room there, you know, I said, this is not it. I mean, it looks desperately alone there. Nobody still uses it. And so being an architect, I went back into sort of the planning process, thinking of, you know, this should get bigger in some way. And we thought of the picture of an oasis where, you know, people have more space, green space to spend time. We designed more sitting, more plants. We even built those, where we got to build those 2 years ago, shipped it out to the city of Esslingen, where it's very easy to set up, very temporary. And that actually worked. A square where nobody wanted to spend time ended up being a square where whenever I went there, 20, 30 people were sitting on these benches and in the screen spaces. So we designed in a very easy way because we figured, it's just about 5 different modules that you can combine in any sort of way. And we talked to our clients saying, okay, use these elements and build your own oasis. It doesn't have to be something we design, but use this nature-based solutions for any sort of square because you know best what you need at that occasion. And that's what we do. We even send out little models, and obviously COVID kind of, stopped us for a bit because spaces where people meet weren't as popular in the last year, but that will change because climate change didn't stop because of COVID. And so people want to spend more time outdoors in green spaces. So we're excited where this will take us, in further steps. And the third, maybe inspiring story I want to tell you more focuses on living green walls. We had a customer in Reutlingen. They said, all right, we have this very busy street and we kind of want to shut a space in between two buildings as a noise barrier wall. So nobody behind is being, is being affected by the noise that's coming from the street. And the country even set up a sort of a measuring station for air quality and noise and all sorts of stuff you can measure right in front of this horribly old structure that was meant to be as a kind of a walkway through a barrier wall. And so the city of Reutlingen, they tore it down. They gave us the idea, okay, what can we design in between those buildings that functions as a noise barrier wall, but will improve the quality of air and space through plants. We kind of figured out, okay, what kind of plants can we use at this occasion? Came up with a selection, translated the first sketches of the architect into a planning, green planning, and we have a system for vertical green walls, which you can then, just as you saw now in the plan, plant in our nurseries. Let's let them grow there, and after 2 months we took them out of our nurseries and brought them to site on these trolleys. You can see the plants are already established in those modules, and we built the wall in a very easy manner. We have full irrigation systems in it, and after roughly 2 months of growing, these were the images we had. And if you think back to what it looked like before and what it looks like now, it's a huge improvement. It's not as threatening anymore to walk through it. It's a lovely space where water fountain was included as well. We put plants on both sides of these walls. And eventually this will improve the air quality on site, which is fantastic. So what I'm trying to pass on to you today is using green, you can achieve quite something in a very positive manner, because everybody likes green. And kind of to leave you with a few thoughts of mine on how to implement those nature-based solutions successfully, because we've been going through these kind of processes and stories that you've just heard quite a few times. Obviously, it's a lot of planning is involved. I'm an architect, so this is sort of what I do most of my day, planning all these systems, what kind of system will work in different sites. It needs a lot of conversations with clients, with local authorities, with people at site. Financing is definitely a big part of it because nature-based solutions do still cost money, although they, the value that comes from it sometimes cannot even be matched. But sort of the most important point of implementing nature-based solutions are the people. You don't necessarily do it for anybody else than the people, and they should have an improvement from nature-based solutions or green infrastructure in their daily life. And so those 4 points is something I want to leave you with. Something we always work around, and it's very inspiring to do so. So do feel free to get back to me if you have any further questions. I'm excited to be speaking to you on green infrastructure and what nature-based solutions can do for your city. So, thanks for your attention.
Thanks for that, Jonathan. It's great to see how you're innovating with getting nature-based solutions, particularly into new spaces where typically it was more difficult to green. Thanks to all the speakers. I'm sure the audience would agree that you presented some really innovative, diverse and convincing approaches to using nature-based solutions to tackle a challenge on the scale of climate change adaptation. Now's the chance for the audience to respond and comment on what they've heard from the speakers. There weren't many questions, but we've had a very late flurry. One particularly concerned about this whether mobile green living roofs can survive the speeds of German motorways. But I think I'll dive in on one topic that seems to be covered by a few people, and this relates to stewardship. So we heard from the video previously about the critical importance of the stewardship phase in relation to ensuring that nature-based solution technical performance is not just forgotten after installation. I was wondering whether the panel have any thoughts on how this stewardship phase is approached in your own context to ensure that the benefits from what you're doing continue to be appropriate after the delivery phase. So perhaps, because maybe this is most directly related to you, Jonathan, we could start with you and how Helix in particular focus on this stewardship phase of the things that you implement.
Yeah, thanks, Stuart. It's a very crucial part of our work is maintenance, or what we call maintenance, but it goes along with stewardship. Obviously, plants need a lot of things to survive. It's water, it's air, it's light, it's nutrition, and it's nice to put flowers on walls, but it needs quite a bit of technical aspects to it, something behind the scenes, how we support those plants in their living conditions. And so building a green wall or building green infrastructure is one thing. Taking care of it is the more important aspect of it, because we don't want to have besides the mobile green living room, maybe, we don't want a temporary installation. We want to put plants on walls and into cities on a large scale for a longer period of time. So what we do is we have our experts, our plant experts. We have maintenance teams that go around taking care of these installations, and through the technical aspects of it, we support our plants with water and nutrition. But stewardship is definitely the main focus of our work.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Jonathan. Gillian, slightly different for you, but on the same topic. So I was wondering how the open space strategy lends itself to this idea of stewardship, in addition to kind of planning nature-based solutions in open spaces.
Yeah, so part of the stuff that we're doing in Glasgow is figuring out what we've got. There's been a long tradition in most of the UK that you can get funding for the start of a project, for the delivery of the project, and then you cross your fingers and whistle and hope that you've got some funding, whether it's revenue funding, to keep that project going. There's a lot of talk about community engagement, about community empowerment in Scotland at the moment. But what we're not asking ourselves is, are our communities resilient enough? Have they got the right resources and tools to allow them to work with us collaboratively or co-produce with us? So we almost do an all or nothing. We do we'll look after it, or you look after it, and we haven't explored the bit in the middle where we could maybe work together with communities to see how we can do some long-term sustainable management of places. And the nature-based solution stuff means we can start to look at managing those places differently. So not constantly mowing them, for instance, or not constantly pruning something, or putting in difficult to manage stuff, I suppose, and using it for different things. If we amend a park to make it a flood alleviation scheme, maybe the engineers who are managing the flooding will maintain the park rather than our parks operatives, and that would save us money and